welcome to Just Onside. It's Sunday. It's the international break. It's a little bit boring, but we've got some exciting topics to discuss during the international break. Some sort of breaking news. Mo Salah announced that he will be leaving Liverpool. Now, in all honesty, we all suspected he'd probably be leaving, but he obviously has made an official announcement. It's got people talking. We're going to talk about it. Obviously, it'll be the right thing to do. But before we talk about Mo Salah, firstly, let me ask you, always, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Ayub. Doing well, thank you. It's been another week, Sunday afternoon here. I think it's about what hours changed in the UK, so I was gone forward. So what 3 hour difference between us. But no, it's been a good week. Pretty boring weekend from a sport perspective, as you can imagine. But yeah, I'm doing okay. There's a lot of things happening in the world right now, Ayub. So
Leave it, leave it. I know it's quite a sensitive subject in your part of the world. It's sensitive here as well, but I think more so where you are. So let's sort of leave
it
it.
is indeed. It is indeed. But I'm doing good. How's your week been? Tell me.
All good, all good. Sort of busy at work and slightly. I mean, almost in a sense, a slight relief as well. There's no Premier League. It just gives me a chance just to take a breather because it's been quite an intense campaign for Leeds.
Well,
Quite
I'm
stressful
surprised.
as always.
As always, yeah, I'm surprised you've been able to take a breather now that you're a bit of a TikTok star, you. I mean, this was. Do you wanna indulge our viewers as to what I'm referring to?
Oh yes, it's well we're sort of behind the eight ball slightly at work. I mean, we've not really sort of tapped into this sort of social media side, especially the Gen Z side of social media. So we're putting a bit of an effort here. So why I would be somebody considered for Gen Z is beyond me. But I think there was no volunteers, so I did a little bit of a TikTok vid. It's gone down pretty well. I was going to do something this weekend as well, but I just thought no, best to quit on a high. It was good fun. It was good fun. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on Insta. So really, I can't really advise people how to sort of to access that video. But if they just put EG on the move, I presume my ugly mug will come on and they can put in a comment. But I won't be reading it anyway. So you can put what you want on that vid. Right. Enough about me and my sort of workplace. Right. Let's crack on. But before we talk about sort of more Salah, I want to talk about the game between Man City and Arsenal. We're rude, obviously, not to. It may be painful for you, but I thought it was a really good game. I really enjoyed that game, and it was a game between two heavyweights. I was expecting an Arsenal victory because I just thought they were the strongest side, or at least they've been playing better football in recent times. But a surprising result, my perspective. Not sure about how you sort of viewed that, but I thought City certainly in that second half were impressive. So talk about the game. I mean, how was you sort of? I mean, I presume you were expecting some sort of silverware, but perhaps great deal of disappointment because it was a great opportunity to win the first cup of the season.
Yeah,
Take it away.
absolutely, Ayub. Expectation isn't something that I do, Ayub, but I don't think Arsenal can count themselves in that particular realm where they can start to expect silverware. It's been such a long time since they've got their hands on some silverware, so I'm not sure that you can say it like that. But yeah, you're in with a shot, aren't you? You're in the final. It's the first chance to get some silverware of the season in a season that promises much for them in terms of them being well placed in all four competitions. But this is when the competition stiffens, and you saw that in the final. Firstly, from a Man City perspective, are you well-deserved winners? No complaints about the result whatsoever. I think they deserve to win off the back of that offensive performance in the second half. I thought the first half was kind of a non-event for the most part. Obviously, Arsenal had those couple of chances early on. City grew into it, but I didn't think there was much in the two teams to tell you about the dominance that came, at least in the second half. So from a game perspective, I think Guardiola got his tactics spot on. He went more on the offensive in the second half, noting that Arsenal, especially with that last minute Eze injury, they were devoid, I should say, of, let's say, offensive class, offensive creativity. I think they became very much a more functional team, especially with Havertz in behind Gyökeres. But anyway, from a City perspective, I thought they went on the offensive. defensive. They penned Arsenal in. Arsenal don't mind that, which we'll come on to later, which I think is problematic in big games. But they took the initiative. They went on the front foot. Yes, the first goal in these games is crucial, and it was a mistake from the goalkeeper, which became quite the talking point after the game. I'm keen to hear your thoughts on that shortly. But yeah, from a City perspective, fantastic result for them. Great performance, really good win. I thought they nullified Arsenal from any type of meaningful attacking threat in the second half. I think there was a statistic, Ayub, that I think until minute 45 to minute 70 in the second half, Arsenal didn't have any progressive passes, which is basically 10 yards plus from, let's say, outside of your own 40-yard line, let's say. So you saw that anyway. Your eyes told you that they were pretty much penned in. So yeah, City, congratulations, well deserved, no complaints from my side. From an Arsenal perspective, yes, disappointment, mainly around obviously the performance. I knew, and this is a nuanced discussion. We can be a bit lazy and say, well, they've got a great squad, so they should be able to handle it. Yes, of course, but when you're in a final, that's when the competition is at its fierce. You'd like to have your best team available inevitably in a final. Now, Man City played their second goal, and I'm not talking about the goalkeepers because that was a choice the managers made, so I'm not going to moan about that. But to have Eze out when he's your one creative player, he's at a good midweek in terms of scoring against Leverkusen. He's got good memories of playing at Wembley in a final against Man City. He's the kind of player who can make a little bit of difference, who can provide that match-winning moment. And he knits things together pretty well for Arsenal. At least he started to develop that in the last month or so. So to then lose that kind of connectivity between the midfield and, let's say, the strike was a challenge. You saw that play out in the game itself. So I think that the issue Arteta's got, and he's got to realize, is that Man City, you have this wonderful way of playing against Arsenal, which is that they line up four players in the offensive line and they don't necessarily press. They say, look, we're going to set up this line of four. They did that to Arsenal a couple of years ago. If you remember when Jack Grealish scored the winner at the Emirates. They are the best team, in my opinion, at avoiding or not giving Arsenal any angles or lines to play with into that midfield and into that strike, which then means you've kind of got to go long and you hope your striker holds it up, which Gyökeres was not able to do. So Arteta has to find, for me, the right solutions. Their offensive game, Ayub, is challenged, if you ask me. I've said that all season long. They lean on their defense perhaps way too much. You saw that even in the second half when he was having a lot of discussions, Ayub, on the sidelines with Gabriel Heinze, with some of the other coaching staff, as to he could see that this was just getting away from him. And it's not perhaps a coincidence that the goalkeeper makes a mistake because they were under pressure, and pressure leads to mistakes being made. So Arsenal, I think I don't think it's so much an issue about handbrake and things like that, Ayub, because I don't think Havertz and Gyökeres is the kind of duo that you want to go with as an attacking duo. They've got a few other issues. Saka's not been up to snuff recently. They had issues on the wings, maybe even ran out of legs in the middle of the park. But I think their number one issue that they're going to have to address, if you ask me, is pace in transition, to be able to get teams to respect them on transitions from a pace perspective. There are one or two players who I've had my eye on, at least in terms of the coming season. I think Arteta will address that in terms of how he can get up the pitch quicker in faster vertical movements so that teams have to respect Arsenal, let's say, in those counter-attacking moments. As of today, you don't have to because they're a very deliberate, cautious, methodical side. And if you don't have legs, so you can't quite get up the pitch quickly enough, and which means teams can really pen you in, so to speak, because they don't respect your pace on the counter. So I think that those are the things that Arteta will look at and say, against the elite level competition, defense is one thing, but then your defense is going to start to creak because you can't ask them to defend for 97 minutes. So in terms of having cross after cross, attack after attack, coming not against the good teams. You can get away with perhaps the average teams, the mediocre teams, maybe even the decent teams, but against the very best of you, I think you come up short, and you come up short big time. So yeah, I think from an Arsenal perspective, things to address. I have every confidence that the manager will address those in the summer. He's a learner. He learns quickly. He's ruthless. Some would say not ruthless enough with the selection of the goalkeeper, which I'm keen to hear your thoughts on. You, but disappointing day, no complaints. um, but not a case of not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Very, very disappointing, but still lots to achieve over the coming weeks and months. So they've got to get their game face on. So yeah, disappointing night, but unfortunately got to move on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk about the keepers. I mean, we've obviously, or you've sort of spoken about the keepers. Now, uh, you've also alluded to the fact that James Trafford was playing as well, and he's not
Yep.
obviously their first choice keeper. So, and in a sense, it was a tale of the two keepers because I think minute six, minute seven, Trafford made a fantastic, almost triple save, and that was almost. I mean, it's early in the game, so sometimes you can't sort of say it's pivotal moment because it was so early in the game, but I think it's an important moment because Arsenal score. Uh, I think City aren't the confident side of old, so it might have been a little bit more pressure uh, on 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 City. Arsenal can defend very well, so it might have just made it a slightly different dynamic in the game. So I thought Trafford was outstanding. I have no issue with that. I think clubs have done this for a number of years now, where it's not always the strongest side, but it was a largely strong side. I mean, you talked about Eze. Eze would have played if he was fit. Uh, so apart from the keeper, it was a very as strong as you could possibly have from both sides. I think it mattered more to City. I certainly would. I mean, I said that before uh, before the game when we recorded our last show, and it sort of turned out to be the case as well when they won. I've never seen celebration like that for a Carabao Cup from Manchester City. It just shows how much it meant to the team and to sort of Pep as well. It was a good performance. I was really impressed in the second half from Man City. I think it was a performance that I've not seen for quite a while against a very competent, strong opponent. Good game. I enjoyed it. It was a lot more sort of fluid than I expected. And I think the right team won in the end. The right team won in the end. And I was pleased for Pep because I think he's had quite a sort of challenging couple of years. So I was absolutely delighted for him. For Arsenal, obviously, they've still got, in a sense, sort of bigger sort of fish to fry. So I don't think they should be bitterly disappointed, but they should be disappointed because I think this was quite an important game because it was a game on the highest stage, albeit it's not the highest tournament or highest trophy that they're going to play for, but it was important enough to almost sort of get the first punch in. So whether it gives that little bit of belief again to Man City, sort of thinking, hang on. We are going to play them again, so there's a chance, obviously, to get points off them. Arsenal could slip up, so maybe it might just be that it's the Carabao Cup. It's obviously a cup, but it may just have sort of ramifications for the rest of the season as well. It's going to be interesting because, as I said, I wasn't expecting City to win the game. Purely just because I think they're not playing that great, and Arsenal, I just think that's such a strong side that I wasn't expecting that result. So I was really surprised by both the result and the performance. Sort of well done, Pep. If it is to be his last season, at least he's got a trophy. But might just whet his appetite. He might just think, hang on, I want another crack at this lot for next season.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, just coming back to the goalkeeper, I do agree that it's not the same for both sides. City, I don't think another Carabao Cup isn't going to move the needle for that football club, at least in my opinion, just because they've won so much in recent times. Do I think their fans would be disappointed with the loss? Of course, every final you want to win. And do I think in the context of this season, does it matter perhaps Guardiola's last? Yes, of course. In those circles, in those conversations, I agree. The reason why the conversation around the goalkeeper is a nuanced one is because Arsenal haven't won for the longest time. So as much as I admire Mikel Arteta's sentiment, I wouldn't criticize him for the sentiment because I think there is room in the game for a little bit of class and a bit of respect and a bit of a good call. But it's also a very ruthless, let's say, environment where you're judged on winning, and that trophy, Arsenal could still end the season trophyless. And imagine a world where that happens and the conversations around Arteta and Arsenal there afterwards. So I think in that respect, I could understand if he went the other way. I was also torn in the days leading up as to what he should do. I believe Raya is the best goalkeeper in the league, arguably in Europe. That's just my opinion. And there's a part of me that thinks because of where Arsenal were, you play your best team. So I think it's a different conversation for Guardiola and Arteta at least. Arsenal, I think, were just more desperate in the grand scheme of things to win that game of football. And you can imagine that perhaps it would have done wonders for them heading into the final few months. Now they've got to answer some legitimate questions, which is that can they get over the line in the league? So yeah, I think just on the goalkeeper, I just wanted to add that. But I'm with you, Guardiola, fantastic. I thought again tactically he was on point, offensively, especially in the second half. They nullified Arsenal. I don't think it's the hardest thing actually to nullify Arsenal as an offensive threat, but it still takes some doing to pen them in and to commit to the midfield that he did. That was ultimately, lots of dribbling talent and lots of getting into pockets and holes that Arsenal simply couldn't fill. And then Arsenal just sat deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's never a recipe for success, at least against the very best teams, because you're going to get caught out. Mistakes will happen, deflections will happen, something will happen. So, and time will tell. And that's what happened. So, Man City, congratulations, well deserved win. No complaints from an Arsenal viewpoint. But again, lots to play for over the coming weeks. Are you?
All right, okay, right. That's before we move on to more Salah. I mean, normally we don't really focus too much on England games, but there was a talking point. A player that obviously plays for Arsenal at this moment in time and was a wonderful servant for Leeds under Bielsa, Ben White. It was a very sort of it it wasn't a surprise, but there was a certain amount of toxicity to sort of towards Ben White. I mean, I think there was even booze when he scored, which is highly unusual. So there is a reason, but I want to sort of get your thoughts on that because it was quite unsavoury. It's you sort of think playing for England should be an honour, but this was almost like there was a quite a sour taste left in the mouth of sort of England players and England sort of officials. So, what was your take on that? I mean, do you think it's warranted? At the end of the day, you pays your money, you're entitled to your opinion. So, were fans right because he did walk out on England? So, what's your thoughts on the Ben White saga?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a topic that's not been discussed as much in different circles, or at least I don't think it's had the conversation hasn't been as provided the right justification to both sides, at least in recent times. A little bit of context as to the backdrop of this story, Ayub. Ben White was chosen to participate for England at the Qatar World Cup in 2022. As part of those World Cup preparations, if you remember, obviously Gareth Southgate was coach. Steve Holland, who's now coaching at Manchester United under Michael Carrick, was part of Gareth Southgate's tenure there at England across that kind of 3 or 4 competitions that he oversaw England's fortunes. And there's not been a lot of public, let's say, knowledge about essentially what happened. But if you read kind of the kind of little nuggets here and there, the talk is that during that World Cup, in terms of the preparation, there was an incident that happened at training where Steve Holland, in amongst a group of players, obviously during a training session, and Steve Holland, by all intents and purposes, is a very good coach, a lot of good feedback and good noises coming out of Old Trafford right now as well. But there was an incident where he questioned Ben White because obviously that there's been this kind of history with Ben White. There's some talk that he obviously once gave an interview suggesting that he wasn't a huge fan of football per se. He wasn't as particularly interested, and that has stuck with him. That stigma has stuck with him throughout his career. That's something he put to bed in a podcast that he did famously with Ben Foster when they were out walking the dog, saying that I know pretty much every single winger in this league, their kind of mannerisms, what they like to do, what they don't like to do. It's a bit of a joke that people think that he's not interested in football. He's just maybe interested in a very different way, in a very professional way. He's not necessarily, kind of living, breathing, watching every single game of football on the TV. Nor should he want to do if that's his volition. But anyway, during this kind of training session, Steve Holland, asked him a question, or at least asked Kyle Walker a question about some certain habits or certain experiences at Man City. Kyle Walker responded. He then asked the same question to Ben White. Ben White, according to the articles that I've read, didn't necessarily know the answer to what he'd been asked. And then Steve Holland alluded to the fact that, well, this is the difference, and this is why, if you're not interested in football, etc. And he made a bit of a, let's say, pointed comments. I think is perhaps as far as I'm willing to go without any real insights. And I think that's by and large accepted that that's what happened. The issue that I have with this particular story, Ayub, is that Ben White then left the England camp. It was stated by England that it was for personal reasons because clearly they didn't want a major distraction heading into that competition. Perhaps that was agreed by all sides. I'm not sure. I'm not aware. But thereafterwards, Ben White, who hadn't made himself available, obviously, because Gareth Southgate was still in charge, Steve Holland was still in charge, Ben White didn't feel comfortable to be in that environment and didn't make himself available. Now, England didn't put all the facts out from their side as to what had happened, which meant that speculation was rife and rampant as to what the specifics were that led to his absence from England. And equally, I think Ben White kept his good counsel as well and didn't necessarily run to the media and run to do every interview under the sun to explain his side of the story, which many players have in that particular space. So I think you've got to allow for perhaps a good level of decorum, maybe on both sides. But because of that, in the absence of any information, ignorance unfortunately spreads. And that's what's happened. Now, I think he's then made himself available because he feels comfortable now that there's a different regime in place under Thomas Tuchel. He comes on, you say, you that wherever you buy a ticket, you're allowed an opinion. We can discuss the merits of that and discuss, okay, what does that opinion potentially look like? I don't agree with booing out of ignorance because what I would say to this is that you're not sure and aware of the reason specifically why Ben White excluded himself for England selection. He's not the first. There's many a more distinguished player that's been playing for England in previous times, i.e. Paul Scholes, i.e. even Jamie Carragher, who have excluded themselves essentially. Jamie Carragher even now talks about it. Liverpool was number one. England wasn't even really a consideration for me. Now, he talks about the fact that Terry and Rio were ahead of him and should be ahead of him anyway. But I don't believe when there isn't the clarity of which party's potentially in the wrong or what have you, that you should subject your boost. I mean, you don't know is what I'm saying. So I don't understand why he has to take the brunt of that. This kind of false patriotism and ignorance that we live by. Oh, didn't make himself available for England. I mean, there's an apathy towards England qualifiers and friendlies across players, across fans anyway. So I think it's a little bit of double standards, generally speaking, and what have you. I didn't watch the game. I can't remember the last England game that I watched other than major competitions. I think Ben White didn't feel comfortable because of what happened. He hasn't put that out there like other, I don't want to say media hosts, but who, in terms of putting it out there inside of the story. And perhaps that's what's cost him. He seems a very quiet lad. I know you're a big fan of him. It's interesting because of the romanticism about the fixture on Friday, and you'll speak to this. So you've obviously Bielsa returning from Uruguay. There was a lovely, I don't want to get the young Leeds fan's name wrong. I think Riley something. I forgot the surname, but there was a lovely picture between him and this young Leeds fan with a disability who came to the team hotel. It was a lovely picture. There was the same picture between those two, Bielsa and the young fan, I think in 2020, I think when he was managing Leeds. But their paths overlap, Bielsa and Ben White, in obviously in that championship winning side of Ayub. And if you read about Ben White's interactions with Bielsa, not just forget the fact that it was a lovely moment when Bielsa actually went up to Ben White on the bench, kind of greeted him. It was a lovely moment. Bielsa speaks about it very fondly and very warmly after the game. But if you read about Ben White's time at Ayub at Leeds, and I'll let you speak about this because he was an absolute mainstay when he arrived at Leeds. He was banished to the under-23s. He was told to lose a few percent body fat, which he jointly did. He participated in every training session. He was doing double, triple training sessions a day. There's some talk about people behind the scenes analytics at Leeds United saying he'd be constantly like sharing videos on WhatsApp and taking on some of the insights about games to come. He started every single game of that championship winning team for Leeds and became an absolute mainstay, a top footballer. You can't become like that if you're not interested in football. You don't hit those levels if you're just somebody who's just this kind of money-hungry millionaire footballer who doesn't understand the privilege that's been bestowed upon him. So I was glad in some ways there was this romanticism of Bielsa returning on Friday because I think that captures, at least he speaks very glowingly about Ben White after the game. But yeah, very disappointed with some of the some of the, let's say, ignorant boos, at least in my opinion. And it's not because he plays for Arsenal. My main point centers around the fact that nobody really knows what happened. It wasn't a case of he couldn't be bothered. Clearly, there was an incident. I've outlined what that incident was, according by all intents and purposes. So I think there's perhaps culpability on both sides. He has to live with the fact that he may have given up some big years playing for England. That's fine. That's something he has to wrestle with. In the meantime, he got married, he's had a child, etc. But also, I think there's culpability on the other side as well in terms of the organisation, FA, England, Gareth Southgate, and Steve Holland, who ultimately have to take a player in and should be protecting him in terms of making sure that that environment is a conducive one for that player to showcase his best talents and abilities. So, yeah, just might say my piece on that particular issue because I think he's been somewhat unfairly depicted in the press and in the media.
I mean, my take on that is, I mean, firstly, Ben White, the player. I mean, I have huge admiration and soft spot for Ben White. He was instrumental in Leeds United getting promoted, and he was fantastic under Bielsa. I mean, he was one of the best players that I've seen put on a Leeds shirt, and he was outstanding, and he was ever present. It really was a
Yeah,
pleasure because it was he's the Rolls Royce of a footballer. I've seen him in the flesh. I've seen him live, and live he's even better because there's an elegance, there's a class. I mean, he's got that superb physique. He's tall, he's lean, he's quick. He's an extremely intelligent footballer. I mean, I still sort of believe he's much better centrally, but it just shows how outstanding he is as a footballer that he's playing on the right hand side as a fullback, which I still believe is not his best position, but it just shows how good he is. Uh, he isn't as well, he isn't. No, I'm not going to say dedicated. That's the wrong word, but he isn't as obsessed and as consumed by football as other players. But I think in terms of his dedication, it's unquestionable because if you play under Bielsa, that is
yeah,
it's a non-negotiable if you're not going to work hard. Uh, but my sort of concern with Ben White is, and not just with Ben White, it's with sports people and people, celebrities in general. We live in a world which is sort of misinformed, ill-informed. We've got populations that really sort of don't have the information, so therefore it almost puts an onus on you to ensure that the narrative is controlled by you rather than obviously somebody that perhaps has an alternative agenda. Now he should have done that. He should have done that. He should have had advisors because it's football now is. I mean, it's the most popular sport in the world. It's the amount of interest that it has, and that's. I mean, for a lot of people playing for England, a lot of supporters, that's a huge deal. So therefore, if somebody uh, refuses to play for England, for a lot of people, that's something which is it's tantamount almost to blasphemy for the amount of people who are obviously obsessed with international football, which there are many people, and I think that's my concern or criticism of Ben White that he should have sort of gone out. Unfortunately, sometimes it needs to be articulated well. Footballers are not normally sort of blessed with great sort of skills in articulating certain issues, especially sort of these contentious issues. So maybe he should have done that, and maybe this is a blowback from that he didn't put his case forward. So fans, you're right, they're ignorant. I mean, I do sort of view a lot of football fans with contempt. It's like with the Leeds when they started booing for the break in the fast. This is football is it's tribalistic. It attracts a certain mindset sometimes, which I find distasteful. But on this one, I think, I mean, Ben White, the football, I think is outstanding. I think he's one of the best footballers, best English footballers, and I hope that he goes central because I think if he goes central, I think there's no sort of end to what this guy is capable of doing if he plays centrally. Whether he's going to have an opportunity at Arsenal, I'm not too sure. But he's an outstanding footballer. I'm not a keen one on sort of booing, but I do think there are occasions when fans are perfectly justified in booing. I don't think this was one instance, but I don't think Ben White did any favours or his agent didn't do any favours by not putting his case forward. Might have made it easier because at least fans would have been aware of what his reasons were. But that's my take on it. But now let's talk about the main man himself. I mean, I've got
yeah. Go.
something over my shoulder, and I've done it for a reason because it's one of the greatest footballers that's ever graced the Premier League, certainly from my perspective, and I think from even neutrals' perspective.
Yeah,
He is somebody that lit up the Premier League. A little bit of controversy every now and then as well, especially latterly. I mean, obviously we talked about what happened a few months ago around Christmas time, sort of New Year time. I mean, I thought he wasn't going to play again after what happened. I'm so grateful that he did play. I'm so grateful that he's made this announcement because almost sort of Klopp-esque. It allows now an
yeah.
opportunity, not just for Liverpool fans, but fans in general. If you like football, you know this guy's been an absolute icon for the Premier League. So it'll be a proper opportunity for him to say goodbye and fans to appreciate for the last sort of few games. This wonderful, wonderful Egyptian king. So I'm glad that it's happened this way. He'll be a huge loss, but you're the stats man. You're the guy with all the numbers and the facts and the figures. Tell the viewers how good this guy was, and in the sort of the pantheon of greats in the Premier League,
Hmm.
where does he sort of sit?
It's a good question that you ask, Ayub, in terms of where he sits within the Premier League pantheon, because I think that's a very interesting or important distinction to make, Ayub, because of the kind of aura of Cristiano Ronaldo that kind of hovers over the Premier League in his couple of stints with Manchester United, Ayub. But just firstly on the player himself overall, Ayub, anytime you lose a player of his ilk from the league, it is somewhat a sad moment because these are players that leave a huge imprint on the sport that you and I absolutely love and follow each and every week. Me mostly in the Premier League. You split your time between the Premier League and Championship, but anyway, we digress. But look, in the end, Salah is in terms of his time, and we're talking mainly obviously about his stint. He's had two stints, hasn't he? At in the Premier
Mm,
League, one with Chelsea, where he was still a young pup, as you would say.
mm.
His 9 years at Liverpool, littered with honours, accolades, and all the rest of it. I mean, look, he's won a couple of Premier League titles. Ayub, they're not obviously going to win the Premier League this season, but a Champions League win, multiple broken records, and what have you. And just before I dive into the stats, Ayub, and I'll dive into the stats shortly, I want to get your thoughts. I was reading about, and perhaps we can also just touch a little bit upon. Obviously, he's a Muslim player in terms of his impact in that space as well, because there are quite a few interesting nuggets that I came across when I was reading on this topic. But for me, the number one thing that I think about is I was reading what Jurgen Klopp spoke about when they signed him from Roma in 2017. A lot of the scouts identified that this was the missing piece. This is what's going to close the gap in terms of Liverpool winning the Premier League title and getting back up there consistently, winning the biggest trophies of Europe. And I just want to repeat what Jurgen Klopp spoke about. And it just, I think, frames it so perfectly in terms of what Mo was going to give to Liverpool. He talks about how he was an ambitious player, wants to win at the highest level. He can fulfill his ambitions at Liverpool. That's all vanilla stuff. Every manager says that about players. But he speaks about that after his signing for 34 million a year, which is an absolute bargain given what he contributed to Liverpool there afterwards. Him, Mane, Firmino, all bought for roughly about 100 million in fees. He talks about how, most importantly for Liverpool, that he was hungry, willing, and eager to be even better. And I think that's the more Salah that we'll think about, Ayub, when we think about his time at Liverpool. You look at the records, and I'll share those shortly after you give me your thoughts. But in terms of just the relentlessness, the professionalism, taking care of his body, everything. I mean, you've just spoken about Ben White. I don't want to kind of myriad because I don't think the two topics are necessarily connected. But in terms of this player having this kind of single-mindedness to correct the wrongs of his previous time, let's say at Chelsea, when he was a young pup and his body wasn't as mature and he perhaps wasn't able to take those steps in a team that was littered with stars in that Chelsea squad. Kevin De Bruyne famously also did, let's say, make the grade there and then went on to be a pantheon great in the Premier League, Ayub. But he came, he saw, and he conquered in terms of his numbers were absolutely ridiculous, which we'll come on to shortly. And we'll talk about where he sits. And I'm again keen to hear your thoughts. But just for me, as a fan of a football club, if you're a Liverpool fan, you want your players coming in being professional, giving every last effort to get every last bit of talent out of yourself to contribute. And I think if you're in those key critical positions within the football team, you want to be making match winning contributions. I will give you one small statistic, which I thought was quite funny. Since 2020, he's the eighth highest scorer at Old Trafford, and that includes Manchester United players as well. I mean, incredible when you think about it. So, no, but just in terms of his match-winning contributions, Ayub, not just on the domestic scene, but on the European platform as well on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and even Saturday nights in finals against Spurs. Incredible footballer. He'll be sorely missed. I think the fact that his abilities have somewhat dipped. I mean, he's 33 years of age. You don't expect him to produce the same numbers that he did last year. They've not completely fallen off a map, but clearly he's taken a step back in terms of where he is as a footballer. I think he'll be sorely missed. And I think the game is much richer, the Premier League, which we believe to be the greatest league, at least in the European formats, and most likely across the world in terms of competition and talent and all the rest of it. He will be a huge, huge miss. 9 years, massive imprint on this league, Ayub. Golden boots to boot, assists to boot, goals to boot, match winning contributions, braces, hat tricks, game defining moments, Ayub. Incredible footballer, and he will be sorely missed. How do you see it, Ayub, from a Liverpool perspective? Obviously, a huge gap, let's say, to fill. Can one player fill his shoes? And just in terms of his impact over the last 9 years, forget the last season where there has been, to your point, a little bit of negativity, but overall, those last 7 or 8 years, many a fond memory, not just for Liverpool fans, but football fans in general.
I mean, purely from a footballing point of view, I think it's not going to be a major blow because I think he's obviously waned off. I mean, he's certainly
Yeah,
nowhere near the player that he was. So I think in terms of purely replacing Mo Salah, that's not going to be difficult because he's nowhere near the player that reached such heights. It's just everything else that goes with Mo Salah. I mean, I think it's. I mean, if you, I mean, you obviously know lots of Liverpool fans. I know lots of Liverpool fans, and they've been very critical of Mo Salah. I mean, they. I mean, some of it's been quite vitriolic. Some of the abuse on some of the sort of WhatsApp groups I'm on, but that's purely based on his performances this year. But I think in terms of there's a thing that I always like is how did somebody make you feel rather than just the numbers.
yep,
It's how did they make you feel, and with Mo Salah, I mean, I think it's. I mean, I love sort of good football. I think most of us do love good football, and he was part of a Liverpool side under Klopp that just played the most amazing stuff. I mean, they called it heavy metal, but it was much more than that. It was surgical at times. It was beautiful to watch, and and I mean, there was I mean, partnerships are always something that I admire within a sporting context. And Liverpool have had some great forward lines, but I think the holy trinity of Firmino, Sané, sort of Mane, and Salah, it's as good as any. I mean, that was just. I mean, to have been able to watch that sort of week in week out as a Liverpool fan must have been absolutely amazing. I mean, I mean, you're obviously going to talk about the numbers, but for me, it's just the fact that he's been just a wonderful, wonderful player. Uh, I wish he'd done a little bit more in terms of being a spokesman as well, in terms of some of the issues that happen in the world. You said he was a Muslim, which he obviously is a Muslim, and sometimes I always, I mean, maybe it's a naivety on my part that I'm
yep,
expecting a little bit too much, but I always hope sometimes that some of these sort of players, especially sort of because at the moment Islamophobia is rife, and if you have a platform, I mean, I was at an event last week where Gary Lineker was one of the speakers, and he's put his head above the parapet. He's always spoken out sort of in support of those without a voice, and I wish he'd done that. But that's a side issue. That's something that really it's not something that it's a stick to beat Mo Salah with. But purely from a football point of view, you're absolutely right. The Premier League, we keep on talking about it being the best league in the world, and you want the best players in the world playing in that Premier League, and he certainly has been. He's lit it up. I mean, I mean, he scored sort of hundreds and hundreds of goals. spectacular goals. He's always scored against Leeds. But but who hasn't? And it's going to be. And I'm glad though that he's done it this way, the announcement, because I do want it to be where I think every ground that he goes to now, I think there will be a great deal of reverence for the guy, whether he's whether you're a Liverpool supporter or not. If you like football, and if it's a sincere like for football, you will have nothing but admiration for Mohamed Salah because he is just one of the most outstanding players that have ever played the game. Uh, where he goes, I'm not sure where he's going to go, whether it's Saudi, whether it's America, whether it's somewhere else. But the Premier League will be poorer for him. From a footballing point of view, I don't think it will be a huge miss for Liverpool because he's certainly not the player that he was. But I think in terms of the character, it will be a very, very sad day. Very much in the way that it was when Klopp, perhaps not as much,
Yeah.
because Klopp obviously was some a man that I just think is irreplaceable. I don't think you'll ever get a character like Klopp again at Liverpool Football Club. But Salah leaves a wonderful legacy, and he's touched so many people, and he's been an absolute sort of brilliant addition to this Premier League. And I hope he finishes on a high. I hope he sort of scores a few more goals, and I hope he scores a goal in his last game because that would be just so fitting. For Mo Salah, who's obviously his game's sort of been based on scoring goals for fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you speak. I mean, you said maybe it's an issue on your part with regards to perhaps doing a little bit more with regards to voicing his opinion, let's say, on perceived injustices and what have you. And I'll comment to that shortly because there were a few interesting tidbits about that I read. But you said that you again, where does he stand in amongst the greats? Currently, he's obviously his time isn't done, and you spoke about how you'd like him to score a few more. Who knows? Maybe he ends that in a final game at Budapest in a Champions League final. Time will tell. It doesn't quite look it right now, but they're still in the competition. And there was a little bit of talk you just on a side piece about I think Roy Keane on the overlap talking about how he wasn't sure if he should have announced it. And Roy Keane, bless him, lost his mother, I think, in the last couple of days and what have you. But he spoke about how Mo Salah, perhaps it wasn't the right timing. Whereas I think it was. I think Liverpool right now are struggling. Had a lot of difficult results. Managers under huge pressure. I think if this can give them some sort of can galvanize the club and the players to say, look, come on, one last hurrah. Klopp obviously did it in a very similar fashion with an announcement and what have you. Let's say before the season ended, I think he did his much earlier, didn't he? I think it was December, January, if memory serves. Salah's done it later on in the season, perhaps because he was under contract actually next season, so there was probably a lot of talks happening between his representatives and the club. But I think it can give them a little bit of, let's say, something to not look forward to, but just gives them a little bit more incentive, let's say, to try and achieve as much success as possible if there wasn't, if it was needed in the first place. Now, Premier League greats, where does he stand? I'm going to rattle off some statistics for you and then give you at least my definitive opinion, or at least my subjective opinion. Doesn't make it right, but it's my opinion in terms of where he stands within Premier League great. We're talking mainly, obviously, about his second stint at Liverpool. But look, 255 goals in 435 appearances in all competitions for Liverpool. Incredible numbers, Ayub. 277 goal contributions for Liverpool. That's the most goal involvements at any one single football club. 47 goal contributions Ayub last season in terms of goals and assists. I think he had a goal or assist once every 78 minutes, which essentially means that Liverpool started every single game 1-0. Because he was guaranteed to get something within the first 90 minutes of the game. Most goals in a 30-plus game season, 32. And he did that, in his very first season at Liverpool. So it wasn't a case of coming back into the league and taking a year or two. No, he hit the road running in terms of big numbers, monstrous numbers, right from the very off. But first, the 10 plus goals, 10 plus assists before Christmas. This was last year, if you remember, incredible numbers. Last year. And remember, he tailed off a little bit last season, yet still achieved incredible numbers. He obviously currently is third in Liverpool's all-time goal scoring rushes out there on a ridiculous number, I think 320 plus. And then you've got Roger Hunt as Well, he's won PFA Player of the Year, Ayub, 3 times, which does distinguish him because that is the most. Even Rooney, I think, won it once only. Golden Boot, he's won it 4 times. So some incredible numbers. Now, in terms of where does he stand overall, if you look at goals, assists, legacy, Golden Boots, PFA Player of the Year, I looked at all the numbers, Ayub, and listen, there's been some incredible footballers that we've had in this league. Just to name a few, we're talking Harry Kane, who's second in the all-time goal-scoring list. Alan Shearer top with 260 league goals, which is this kind of hallowed number, isn't it, Ayub, in terms of 260 league goals? Will anyone ever break that particular number? We've got some recent phenomenons in Haaland, but in terms of even previously Aguero, in terms of his goals per minute, Drogba, just to name a few. I looked at all the numbers, Ayub, and then I also, and you made a very good point, Ayub, about football is essentially how people make you feel as well, in terms of this kind of visual, or let's say this impact that they leave on you when you've watched the games and what have you. So for me, it boiled down to 3 players. It boiled down to, in terms of Premier League pantheon greats, for me, it was between Thierry Henry, Mo Salah, and Wayne Rooney, actually. In terms of, if you look at the legacy, most people might have expected me to say Ronaldo. I think that discussion you can have in terms of winger and all the rest of it. But if you look at just out and out numbers at you, I think for me, it's between those particular 3, in my opinion. Just to give you a few quick numbers between the 3 of you, Wayne Rooney, 491 appearances in the league, 208 goals, 103 assists, 5 Premier League titles. But interestingly, no Golden Boots, only 1 PFA Player of the Year. Henry, 258 appearances, 175 goals, 74 assists, 2 Premier League titles. Same as Mo, 4 Golden Boots, and Mo finishes or currently 323 appearances, 191 goals, 93 assists, 2 Premier League titles, Golden Boots. If you look at the actual numbers, I think in terms of out and out numbers, but also then the kind of the games played, let's say, in terms of the time that you've done it in, you could probably just boil it down to Henry and Salah, because they've both done it in the least amount of games compared to at least Rooney, who had a massively distinguished career. Let's be very clear. We're talking about a player who produced at the highest level, no doubt about it, for an extended period of time. But I just think the 3 PFA Player of the Seasons for Mo, I think, kind of bridges him into that kind of second position, at least. If you look at Henry and Mo, it's actually very similar. In terms of minutes per goal and what have you, I think Henry just edges him. I think aesthetically, you would argue that Henry, just in terms of the flair and the creativity and what have you, Henry perhaps edges him. And perhaps this Premier League discussion between at least these 2 players, and they are 1 and 2 for me, is a little bit like the global debate that we have about Ronaldo and Messi. Messi, this wonderful footballer, aesthetically the most pleasing on the eye that we've ever seen, really. But Ronaldo, in terms of this work ethic, relentless attitude, and this kind of workmanlike that he dragged himself to that level. Maybe you could make a similar argument for Henry. I mean, Henry, again, incredible athlete and the rest of it. But perhaps that's where more you give him credit, because you say he's a very diminutive player. Again, maybe perhaps similar to Messi in terms of the size and physical features. But in terms of, he didn't have, let's say, the grace that, let's say, Messi did, but that kind of relentlessness, that ability to physically improve himself, to get up to that level. For me, Henry still remains the very best player that the Premier League has had. It's just my opinion. I think just in terms of his impact, his flair, because the game is ultimately, like I said, it's an entertainment industry. I think Henry just, in terms of his all-around play, high physical prowess, athleticism, goals, assists, hat-tricks, his ability to put fear into the defenders' minds and hearts. No doubt Salah's done that as well. I'm not saying no. It's no shame to be regarded as the second greatest Premier League player of all time, believe you me. But for me, it would still say Henry as number 1 and Mo as number 2, Ayub. And if you just allow me, Ayub, just on that particular point about, you mentioned about kind of from a Muslim perspective, because for me, it's very topical right now. I'm actually trying to inform myself as much as possible, given everything that's going on in the world right now. You spoke earlier about being uninformed. There's that famous Denzel Washington quote. If you don't read the newspapers, you're uninformed. If you read the newspapers, you're misinformed, and what have you. Exactly.
Yeah, which is where I got it from.
Yeah, it's a wonderful quote, and what have you. But he did speak up when the whole situation in Gaza was at its particular high. He at least you said you wanted to put his head above the parapet. He did at least ask for aid to be sent. And I think different players have different reasons for how much they're willing to put out there. We know what the culture is in terms of cancel culture. And also, it's maybe a burden that you're not willing to carry because you might not have the powers of articulation. You said football players are not necessarily the best at articulating. So he might have just felt this is my own little piece that I can do. But there's that famous quote, Ayub, isn't there, that Liverpool fans have taken into their heart that if he's good enough for you, he's good enough for me. Then sitting in a mosque is where I want to be. And there has been this kind of wonderful alliance between, let's say, Liverpool fans and Mo Salah. He famously does the action of sujood Ayub after he scores a goal, which is kind of prostrating on the ground after every football after goal. And I think there is something to be said Ayub about words and actions. And I think sometimes subliminally, subconsciously, through your actions, through your behaviors, I think that can have a much more profound impact than, let's say, perhaps just words and what have you. And there was an interesting study Ayub done for what it's worth, by a very respected university, Stanford University in America in 2021. And they actually did a study and they understood that Salah had actually helped soften some of the attitudes in terms of towards Muslims actually in the UK, a country normally divided by, let's say, disagreements. And you see that right now about immigration, multiculturalism, or what have you. And what they saw was that the kind of salience of Salah's Muslim identity actually reduced the prejudice towards Muslims at large, and even hate crimes around Liverpool had been reduced by 16% after Salah signing, whether coincidental, whether or what have you. Time magazine had him as one of the most influential people in the world in 2019. So I think there is something to be said about his impact, not just from a faith perspective, but also in terms of bringing people together. I think Liverpool fans hold him in the highest regard. I asked my two brothers who they thought was the better Liverpool player in their lifetime, Gerrard or Salah. They were split, actually, which was interesting for me. But yeah, I think he has, in his own little way, done quite a bit for the Muslim community just by sheer actions, behaviors, by showing that ultimately there's a lot that we have in common, as much as people might want to divide us, than actually having these kind of differences in opinion and fundamental values. So yeah, wonderful footballer. You second for me in terms of Pantheon Premier League greats. Where do you have him? Do you have him at the very top, or do you have him similar to me, second or third?
Yeah, I mean it's you can split them sort of by the width of a cigarette paper because and it's obviously these are all opinions. I mean the numbers are there. The numbers are outstanding for all three. I mean, and the reason why I sort of sway towards more Salah is, I mean, and then it's not a statistical reason, but it's more of a general reason because he's from not the most powerful footballing nation, albeit in African Nations Cup, they've always done well. But in terms of the globe, Egypt isn't a footballing powerhouse. So he's obviously sort of grown up in a country where it's they're passionate about football, but it's not the strongest nation, and he's carried the weight of a nation, the expectation of a nation, and it's a bit similar to sort of Sachin Tendulkar back in the day because there's a huge weight of expectation because. There's a lot of pressure, and he's handled that superbly, and he's committed to Egypt because I suppose, I mean, it would have been easy for him to start sort of missing games for Egypt, but he's never done that. So I think from that perspective as well, I've always sort of had a very soft spot for Mo because he's from a country which isn't a superpower
Yeah.
in the sport. So it's much harder. It always is. I mean, if you look at sort of best players in the world, they usually are associated with nations that have sort of been quite sort of footballing powerhouses. He hasn't. And he's done great things for Egypt. And I just sort of think he's been, for me, the best player in the Premier League in terms of the three that you've sort of mentioned. But they're all great. I mean, it's you can make an argument for each and every one. I would just sort of say, let's just enjoy the fact they're great players. Let's just enjoy the fact that we had the privilege and the opportunity to see Salah sort of grace the Premier League, and he will be sorely missed.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were right to mention Egypt, if you know anything about kind of Egypt in a sense as a country and what have you, he's always there in terms of billboards and placards and all the rest of it. He is revered, probably the most famous, at least in terms of that particular world. Obviously, I had heartache again in the African Cup of Nations. I think they lost in the semi-finals, if memory serves, again to Senegal and Sadio Mane. I think scoring and what have you. Although there's been a bit of controversy about that competition in recent weeks, as well with the winners being robbed of the trophy and then them parading the same trophy a couple of days ago. I mean, it's all sorts of stuff going on. But you're right, Ayub. And I think if you look at, for me, the thing, and I just final comment, Ayub, it, what I love about sports, and maybe that's a topic we can discuss, what moves us in terms of sport in general, but it is the stories. I've become much more, I would say, in my following of sport, uh, individuals narrative based, let's say, than collective team based. And what I mean by that is the protagonists of the story, they bring the hype, they bring the money, the individualism, Messi, Ronaldo. And you see that in other sports, whether it's Verstappen and in other boxing, Muhammad Ali, there's kind of individualism, although boxing is an individual sport anyway, but you get the point. I think there is a movement towards, let's say, kind of footballers becoming their own entity in some ways. And when you read about his story, you've in terms of he came from a small village of Nagridge, not too far from the Nile and what have you. And even from a very young age, you 14, he started playing for Arab Contractors, one of the Cairo's super small professional clubs. And I did some reading where they were talking about how he'd have to commute, let's say, 4 hours one way and 4 hours the other way just to kind of play football games. And there is something that kind of never leaves you about that kind of commitment and that kind of mindset. And you see that with Mo. If you think about the peak years of Liverpool, that drive, that consistency, that single-mindedness, I come back to it. He's there over the top of your right shoulder, scoring big goals for Liverpool right there. But that's what I think about. The sacrifices, you wear it on your heart. It's what brings you to the big time. And it just shows that with hard work, with sacrifice, with dedication, you can reach the pinnacle of your sport, irrespective of if you're not being given Adonis-like kind of physical attributes and all the rest of it. So incredible footballer. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's got a body I'd die for, but I'm just saying. But no, wonderful footballer, Pantheon great. We've lost a couple now, back to back in De Bruyne and Salah, and hopefully from a Liverpool perspective, they'll be hoping that he can write a fairy tale storybook ending in Budapest in the Champions League final.
Here, a fitting tribute. I think hopefully we've you've certainly done him justice. I think with the numbers there. Hopefully we've talked about him in glowing terms, and rightly so. And we'll be interested. I mean, obviously we've got a number of viewers who are Liverpool fans, so we'll be interested to find out where you sort of, obviously there'll be a Liverpool bias, but put down on the comments where you sort of think he sits. Is he better than Henry? Is he better than Rooney? If he is, why? What's the reasons?
Just one more thing, Ayub, just before we finish. There was an interesting tidbit from Marcelo Bielsa, who was here, obviously coach of Uruguay, sitting on that famous bucket or box that he often does in the touchline, which he made famous at Leeds. Spoke very glowingly about his time at Leeds and how he's tried to stay away because the nostalgia, as he speaks about, is something that he wants to just leave it right there, just in terms of, and he spoke about how Leeds, in terms of the Leeds fans, the faithful, how they make him feel, and all. Very, very glowing tribute. I thought it was a wonderful tribute. But he did say in his comments that he's obviously desperate for Leeds to stay up, because he says that's where they deserve to be. So just want to catch it just caught me, that particular little part of the sentence. Do you think Leeds deserve Ayub to be in the? I think he means from a club fan's perspective. But next week, FA Cup. But back to the grind from next week. Ayub, big 10 games ahead for Leeds. Where do you think very quickly they stand as we head into the final furlong?
I mean, it's a flip of a coin between sort of West Ham, Forest, Spurs, and us. I mean, I just, I'm genuinely, I'm still sort of very worried, because I think some of the fixes I mean, the results. I think what worries me more is the results that we've just had. It's like that result against Sunderland. It still sort of pains me. Against Crystal Palace as well, we were in the ascendancy. We had a penalty. DCL does what DCL does best: miss, and he had a sitter at England as well.
I saw.
I think that's the last time we'll see him in an England shirt. He fluffed his lines again, and that's one of the major reasons why I fear, because we're relying on somebody who's. There's a slight impotency in front of goal DCL has never been a prolific goal scorer. And he's not one of these where you give him one chance, he'll put it in the back of the net. He is somebody that he has moments where he might in 4 or 5 games. He did it this season, and he's done it previously for Everton as well. He has small spells, and it's a small spell, but then he goes on a very dry run, and that's the reason why. Because we've not scored in 4 Premier League games. If you don't score, it's highly unlikely you're going to stay in this league. So I genuinely fear. I'm just hoping we win the FA Cup. Well, at least get to the semi-final, because it will be a trip to Wembley. Because if we are going down, at least it will be something to look forward to. If I was a betting man, and this is not just me being an eternal pessimist for being a Leeds fan, I would sort of say we're favourites to go down. Forest, they're in decent form. They've got decent players. They had a really good result. I still keep on thinking that Redknapp's going to sort of stroll in to White Hart Lane, or whatever the stadium's called now, and that will be a huge fillip and boost for them. West Ham, Somerville's back. They've got Bowen as well. They've just got enough quality. And when I come to Leeds, I can't think of anything. It's just
You keep some clean sheets. You keep some clean sheets. I mean, just very quickly on Spurs, that you say that we text one another the other day. Horrible result. Just very quickly. You keep saying Redknapp's going to come in, and look, listen. I think they are going to have a change of manager. Unfortunately, I think the manager lost his father, so I think it's a case of timing and just a bit of decorum or what have you. But yeah, most likely they will change. But I think it's very even. Difficult to tell. Spurs just don't look like they're pulling up any trees. But anyway, time will tell. I hope for your sake, like Bielsa said, they stay up this season.
That's who we need, Bielsa. Right, and on that a depressing note again, as soon as we start talking about Leeds, it's always a depressor, isn't it? It's always a downer. But look, that's for 2 weeks' time. At the moment, I can enjoy looking forward to the FA Cup next week on a Sunday. It should be a cracker, and it's almost like it's one where if we lose, I'll be gutted, but it's not going to be the end of the world. So as always, viewers, thank you so much. Hope you enjoy this show. It was, and I hope we did Salah some justice. But I'm sure we're going to talk about Salah a little bit more before he actually sort of hangs up his boots for Liverpool. Okay, so. Enjoy the rest of the Sunday. It depends on what time you're watching it. But we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Ta-ra for now.